One of the book's sharpest ideas is that boundaries are not merely taught by lectures. They're taught by reality. A child learns boundaries when love and consequences live in the same house. An employee learns boundaries when responsibility is clarified instead of endlessly absorbed. An adult learns boundaries with the self when desire is no longer allowed to run the whole kingdom. In this episode, boundaries moves from relationships into training and stewardship. Welcome back. This part covers the chapters on children, work, and the self. The chapter on children begins with the idea that parenting is not just about controlling behavior today. It is about preparing a child to own life tomorrow. A child who never experiences limits may become an adult who expects others to carry discomfort. A child who is controlled harshly may become an adult who obeys externally while lacking internal self-control. The goal is neither permissiveness nor domination. The goal is maturity. Cloud and Townsend argue that children need to learn ownership. Their feelings, choices, mistakes, talents, and responsibilities belong to them in age-appropriate ways. Parents begin with a great deal of control because infants cannot govern themselves. But wise parenting gradually transfers responsibility to the child. The transfer happens through boundaries. A parent says, "This behavior is not acceptable." A parent allows consequences. A parent distinguishes between the child's problem and the parent's problem. If a child refuses homework, the parent may guide, structure, and support, but the child must eventually experience the result of refusing responsibility. The book is especially concerned with rescuing. Rescue feels loving in the moment because it removes pain. But if parents always remove pain created by a child's choices, the child may never develop the muscles of responsibility. Consequences are not cruelty when they are appropriate, proportionate, and connected to reality. They are part of how wisdom is learned. Children also need to see parents with boundaries. If a child can control the house through tantrums, manipulation, disrespect, or endless negotiation, the child is not being loved into maturity. The child is being trained to believe that other people's limits are not real. That lesson becomes expensive later. At the same time, the authors do not argue for cold discipline. Connection matters. Empathy matters. Children need attachment, comfort, and patient instruction. A boundary without love can become harsh control. Love without boundaries can become chaos. Good parenting keeps both together. Then the book moves to work. Work is another place where boundary problems can be praised as dedication. The over-responsible employee gets things done. The whole system may quietly depend on that person absorbing unclear expectations, poor planning, and other people's unfinished tasks. Cloud and Townsend describe workers who cannot say no to unreasonable workloads, cannot clarify job responsibilities, cannot address conflict directly, or cannot let coworkers experience consequences. Some people bring family patterns into the workplace. A boss becomes a parent figure. Disapproval feels unbearable. Saying no feels dangerous. So the employee says yes and calls the exhaustion professionalism. A major work boundary is clarity. What is my job? What is not my job? What deadline is realistic? What priority should come first? What trade-off are we choosing? Many workplace conflicts grow because people avoid these conversations until resentment takes over. Another work boundary is time. If every emergency becomes your emergency, your life will eventually become an emergency. A healthy worker can serve well without pretending to be infinite. That may mean negotiating deadlines, documenting responsibilities, saying what can and cannot be done, or refusing to rescue a pattern that never changes. Work boundaries also require truth with authority. This does not mean reckless rebellion. It means mature communication. If a boss assigns more than can be done, the worker may need to say, "I can complete it by Friday," or "be by Friday," but not both at quality. Which is the priority? That sentence is not laziness. It is reality entering the room. The book also speaks to people who avoid responsibility at work. Boundaries are not a tool for doing less than your share. They clarify ownership both ways. You are not responsible for everything, but you are responsible for your assignments, attitude, honesty, effort, and growth. Then comes the chapter on boundaries with the self. This is one of the most uncomfortable turns in the book because it removes the easy story that the problem is always someone else's demand. Sometimes the boundary violator is inside the house. Cloud and Townsend discuss areas where people may be out of control. Eating, money, time, sexuality, substances, the tongue, anger, or patterns of procrastination and avoidance. In these cases, the issue is not only saying no to others. It is learning to say no to impulses that damage your own life. This is where the property line image becomes even more personal. If my life is my property, I must not only keep destructive things out, I must also govern what happens within. Freedom is not the ability to obey every appetite. Freedom is the ability to choose what serves love, health, truth, and purpose. The authors are careful that self-boundaries usually require support. People rarely gain self-control through shame alone. Shame says, hide this. Growth says, bring it into light with safe people, truthful structure, and repeated practice. This connects back to the law of exposure. Hidden problems remain powerful. Exposed problems can be helped. A person with weak self-boundaries may need external structure for a season. That could mean accountability, financial limits, time blocks, counseling, support groups, or removing access to a repeated temptation. This is not failure. It is wisdom. Offense is useful precisely because the field matters. This episode shows how practical the book's framework is. Boundaries are not only for dramatic confrontations. They shape bedtime, homework, job descriptions, calendars, budgets, appetites, and speech. They turn vague stress into specific ownership. The question becomes, where is responsibility unclear? Is a child carrying too little of what belongs to them? Is a parent carrying too much? Is a worker absorbing what belongs to a boss or coworker? Is an adult blaming others while refusing to govern an inner habit? Boundaries do not answer every detail, but they ask the right ownership question. Thank you for listening to this 4th episode. Next, we move into the spiritual heart of the book, boundaries with God, and the resistance that appears when a person finally begins to change. Final close. Maturity is not control over everyone else. It is stewardship of the life that has actually been placed in your hands. The parenting material is especially important because it shows boundaries as formation, not merely protection. Parents are not just stopping bad behavior. They are helping children develop an internal structure. A child who learns that choices and consequences belong together is being prepared for reality. The author's approach also challenges parents who confuse love with preventing all distress. A child who never has to wait, lose, repair, apologize, practice, or accept limits may feel loved in the moment, but the long-term lesson is dangerous. The child may learn that discomfort is an emergency someone else must solve. At work, the same principle appears in adult clothing. Organizations often reward the person who absorbs dysfunction. That person becomes the unofficial shock absorber. But if the system never has to face its limits, nothing improves. A clear boundary may be the first honest data the workplace receives. Work boundaries are not only for employees. Leaders need them too. A leader with poor boundaries may rescue underperformers, avoid hard conversations, overpromise to clients, or create emergencies through lack of clarity. Good leadership defines responsibility, gives support, and lets consequences teach. The chapter on the self prevents the reader from using boundaries only as an accusation against others. It asks, where am I out of control? Where do my appetites, fears, habits, or impulses cross the line I claim to value? This is uncomfortable because it brings the boundary conversation inside. Self-boundaries often begin with confession, not willpower. A person says, I'm not managing this area well. I need structure. I need help. I need truth. That is not weakness. It is ownership. A hidden lack of self-control grows in darkness, while an exposed one can receive support and strategy. The author's larger point is that freedom and discipline belong together. Without freedom, discipline becomes external control. Without discipline, freedom becomes slavery to impulse. Healthy boundaries train a person to choose what is good even when another part of the self wants the easier thing. This part of the book is practical because it refuses to let boundaries stay in emotional vocabulary. It brings them into calendars, chores, assignments, budgets, conversations, and habits. A boundary that never affects Tuesday afternoon may still be only an idea.